Okay, let's think about this for a second. What does it really mean to, stand out, to really be yourself, an individual, when everything around you seems to be pushing you, maybe quietly, maybe not so quietly,
Ah,
to just fit in? You've probably felt that, right? That little nudge to just go with the flow, keep your head down. Well, today we're doing a deep dive into someone who absolutely refused to do that, Paconius Agrippinus from ancient Rome. Now, honestly, we don't have tons of records about him, which is frustrating. But what we do have paints this picture of just radical individuality, unshakable principles. So our mission here is to explore how Agrippinus lived as this red thread, as he called it, in a really corrupt empire. We're drawing a lot from Ryan Holiday's Lives of Stoics. And just to set the scene, we're talking ancient Rome under emperors like Claudius and especially Nero. This wasn't a subtle time. It was brutal. Greed, power grabs, compromising your values. That wasn't just common. It was almost like how you survived. So you see right away why someone like Agrippinus was so different, so noticeable.
it's fascinating, isn't it? Because even with just these fragments, his character, it just bursts through the historical record. He's this incredible case study in Stoic principles in action. The whole philosophy about focusing on your own judgment, your own actions, the things you can control, and just accepting what you can't. And it really highlights the sheer courage it takes to live authentically, especially when you're living under tyranny, where the cost could be, well, anything.
It's such a stark contrast to the world around him. And this idea he had, this threads in a garment analogy, seems really central to how he saw himself. Could you unpack that for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So Agrippinus looked around and he saw, most people are like just threads, countless threads in some huge piece of fabric. You can't really tell one from another. And they're okay with that. They're content to conform, stay anonymous, play their part without making waves. Which, let's be fair, under a ruler like Nero, that's a pretty smart survival strategy. Keep your head down, don't attract attention. It makes sense. It's safe.
Okay, so that's the understandable route, the safe route. Why then, especially thinking about his family's past, did Agrippinus choose such a radically different and frankly dangerous path?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? He fundamentally refused to compromise, just wouldn't do it. He has
Yeah.
this famous quote, right? I want to be the red, that small and brilliant portion which causes the rest to appear comely and beautiful. He, and then he asks rhetorically, you know, be like the majority of people. And if I do that, how shall I any longer be the red?
Hmm.
He wasn't just accepting the status quo. He was actively um, rejecting the whole idea of blending in.
Wow. It really has that intense feel, almost like that modern line, if I can't be my own, I'd feel better dead.
Hmm.
But you're saying for Agrippinus, this wasn't just talk. This was his core conviction. He was ready for exile, maybe even death. How often do you see that level of actual commitment?
It's incredibly rare. That's why he still stands out to us, I think.
Uh-huh.
And what's really vital here is understanding why he wanted to be different. It wasn't ego. It wasn't some craving for the spotlight. Epictetus, the philosopher who knew him, actually said, it is right to praise Agrippinus because, although he was a man of the very highest worth, he never praised himself. Apparently, he'd even blush if someone else praised him. So the sense is, he would have much rather just lived by his principles quietly without any fuss.
Okay, so that's crucial. This wasn't performance art. It wasn't about getting attention. So how did this deep inner conviction, how did it actually show up in his life, in his actions, his choices? How do we know it was genuine principle and not just wanting to be noticed?
That's exactly the right question. His nonconformity wasn't a show. It seems to be a really pure example of principles driving actions, instead of shaping your actions, hoping for praise or recognition. His character really did seem to dictate how he behaved.
And speaking of character, that family history, it,
Mhm.
it must have cast a long shadow, right? The injustice his father faced.
Oh, absolutely. It's hard to imagine it didn't.
Yeah.
His father was executed by Emperor Tiberius. The charges were basically trumped-up treason. And the story gets even weirder. There was some incident with a palace dwarf. Apparently his father teased Tiberius about his looks or something,
Yeah.
and that might have sealed his fate. Just bizarre and cruel. And the historian Tacitus specifically says Agrippinus inherited his father's hatred towards emperors. So yeah, that personal history, that deep sense of injustice, it surely fueled his own principled stance.
Yet, despite that background, that hatred towards emperors, he actually served in government. Governor of Crete and Cyrene. That seems surprising. But I guess what really matters is how he governed, right? Especially then.
Exactly. It's the how, that's remarkable. Because in an era when lots of governors used their position to, well, get rich, Agrippinus took a completely different approach. He saw himself dealing with justice not as an enemy of the accused, but as a curator and guardian. Epictetus tells this story about how Agrippinus would actually try to persuade the people he sentenced that the sentence was proper, was just. He explained it like, "It is not as an enemy or as a brigand that I record my vote against them, but as a curator and guardian, just as also the physician encourages the man upon whom he is operating." It shows this deep respect for the process, for the law, even for the person being condemned.
That's 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 a really unique way to think about sentencing someone, trying to get them to see the fairness in it. It points to this absolute commitment, doesn't it? No hesitation, no second guessing when it came to doing the right thing. Like that famous story Epictetus tells some other philosopher is agonizing. Should I go to Nero's banquet? Shouldn't I? A real moral dilemma, you imagine. And Agrippinus basically tells him, look, you should go. Why? Because you were even thinking about it. For me, Agrippinus said, it's not even a question. What's that telling us?
It tells us everything about his decision-making process, or lack thereof. For him, if your principles are clear, there's no need for all that hemming and hawing, as Epictetus put it. No weighing the options back and forth about what's right. Epictetus, talking about Agrippinus' attitude, said that anyone who gets caught up in those kinds of calculations approaches very near to those who forget their own character.
Mm.
For Agrippinus, if you knew who you were, you knew what to do, instantly.
Yeah.
It really echoes that old idea from Heraclitus. Character is fate. Your character determines your path. It isn't just something you choose moment by moment.
Wow. So this isn't just history, is it? It hits right at a core question for us today. How do we act when our principles get tested, when it would be so much easier just to bend a little?
Absolutely. When you zoom out, Agrippinus offers this model of just radical internal consistency. His actions seemed to flow straight from his character. They weren't bent by external pressures. They weren't calculated for personal advantage. It's a really profound model for ethical leadership, actually, where
Yeah.
integrity isn't just a word you say. It's the very foundation of every choice you make.
And inevitably, I suppose, those principles, that character, they were going to be put to the ultimate test. He ended up facing charges, just like his father.
Yes, he did. Accused of conspiracy against Nero. History repeating itself.
Yeah.
His reaction, his composure, it's just astounding. Apparently, right when his trial was starting, he just casually mentioned to someone it was time for their daily exercise.
Yeah.
And while the Roman Senate is literally debating whether he lives or dies, he goes off, works out, takes a cold bath, enjoys a nice steam. This is someone completely unbothered by external events, focusing only on what he could control, his own routine, his own mind.
That level of calm is almost unbelievable. How did he manage that? And then when the verdict comes back exile, not death, and they tell him his property isn't confiscated, his only reply is, very well, we shall take our lunch in Arisa. Arisha, the first town on the road out of Rome. Just, okay, let's go. Immediate practical acceptance. No complaining, no drama, just ready to move on.
It perfectly illustrates that powerful line Epictetus attributes to him. I am not a hindrance to myself. He refused to make things worse for himself by lamenting his situation, by adding internal suffering on top of the external hardship. He wouldn't let circumstance compromise his inner state, his dignity. It's pure stoicism. Pain might happen, but suffering, that's on you.
Just think about that. I'm not a hindrance to myself. That internal strength. Epictetus also says something incredible, that whenever Agrippinus faced a hardship, he would compose a eulogy upon it. A eulogy for a fever, for being disgraced, for being exiled. What strikes you most about that kind of equanimity?
That's where you see the philosophy becoming lived reality, isn't it? It's the Stoic ideal in practice. Focus fiercely on what's yours, your judgments, your reactions, and completely let go of what isn't. Agrippinus didn't just accept his fate, he actively reframed it. He saw these things not as disasters, but almost as opportunities to exercise his virtue. He refused to be a victim. He'd acknowledged the reality, okay, exile, got it, and then essentially celebrated as part of the tapestry of life and moved forward.
So if there wasn't any actual evidence he committed a crime, why was he exiled? What was the real charge against him in Nero's eyes?
That's a great question. And Tacitus, the historian, scratching his head, finds no proof of any actual wrongdoing. But Tacitus gives us a clue. He mentions that around the same time, Nero exiled this really talented poet. Why? Simply because he had been too talented.
Yeah.
And the implication is, it was the same for Agrippinus. His real crime was just daring to be different, daring to be excellent, daring to be the bright red when Nero thought he was the only one who deserved to stand out.
So it's the classic nail that sticks up gets hammered down. Agrippinus must have known that saying, or the sentiment behind it, but he either ignored it or, more likely, just refused to let it scare him. For him, and maybe for his father too, being that standout individual, that red thread, was just a price worth paying. Maybe not even a price he considered avoidable if he was to be true to himself. So, wrapping this up, Agrippinus stands out profoundly. Not for ego, not for attention, but for this bedrock of principle he wouldn't budge on, even when it cost him basically everything. It really does make you ask yourself, doesn't it? In our own lives, how much red are we really willing to be?
Yeah, and that final point is so important. His story isn't just about one guy in ancient Rome. It's about that ongoing tension, that friction in any society between conforming and being genuinely individually principled.
Hmm.
It forces us to think about the courage that takes to be truly unique based on conviction and what value we actually place on that kind of life, especially when standing out might mean getting, well, hammered down.
What an incredible figure, Agrippinus. Just that raw individuality, the commitment to principle, that unbelievable composure facing hardship and injustice. So much to think about there. Remember, this deep dive was about getting those key insights quickly, finding those aha moments without getting bogged down. And Agrippinus definitely gives us a powerful aha about what character truly means. So maybe the thought to leave you with is this. We live in a world that says it values individuality, but often, let's be honest, it punishes real difference. So what does it mean for you in your life to be the red? Is there a principle you hold that deeply, something you'd risk being hammered down for to stay true to it?